used to baseball. What was it like growing up with Tom and six brothers, a total of six brothers?
Seven brothers.
Seven brothers.
I had seven brothers. It was very interesting. I really enjoyed it. I can't say that I found it bad. I think I had a beautiful experience of being raised with boys, because as of now, I think I have more of a. I'm not mannish to a great extent, but I enjoy the sports that they did, and I was able to play with them, and so we grew up that way. And I was in the middle of the boys. I was the fifth oldest, or the fifth youngest, whatever, and my sister was older, so we never really knew my sister as much. And so then the three older brothers, and then the four younger ones. And so we would play all the different sports, and I was always included in the sports with them. And that, I think, was a wealth of experience, as opposed to, I don't know, I might be prejudiced, as opposed to growing up with all sisters. I would have liked to have had a sister, you know, to have grown up with, but I didn't have that opportunity. So that was...
Was Tom different than the other brothers at all, or was he just like a...
No, I would say he was not different than any of the others. We didn't get into a lot of fights or troubles of that sort, or we didn't pull jokes on one another. You know, I think we were just a common, ordinary family that enjoyed one another. And
what kind of relationship did you and Tom have? I mean, was he older than you, or I mean, what age? Or
Tom is just 13 months younger than I am, and we had, I would say, we had a good relationship growing up. He'd help me with my homework at times, and then he would come out and play catch with me oftentimes on Sunday morning, because I loved to pitch and I was on a baseball team. So he would come out and let me practice with him, and you know, and because he enjoyed the sports too. And now today we even will play tennis together, and very competitive. I mean, he wants to win, but I also want to win, so you know.
How does he do when you win sometimes?
He doesn't like it very much.
What doesn't he like?
He doesn't like me beating him, so then he'll try and get a good hard serve back over for me. But, you know, I get them back to him too, but, you know.
How is it that, everything okay? Okay. How is it that you both ended up with vocations? Is that something your mom emphasized, or your family?
No, Mom and Dad never emphasized it at all. I don't know. They must have prayed for, you know, for vocations maybe, or it was just a gift from God, I think, that led us both into the religious life. Two or three of my other brothers also either went to the seminary or were in the seminary for a while also. Dan was in the Holy Cross Brothers for 3 or 4 years, and Jack graduated from Sacred Heart, and Jerry went 1 year to Sacred Heart. So it was just the influence, I think, that my mom and dad had over us as growing up. And then I think also we all went to the Catholic schools, and then in the fact that we had 3 aunts in the same community, the IHMs, that also maybe was some factor in, you know, becoming religious.
You know, I guess we can't get into this declining religious vocations nowadays type of, that's a whole other story. But so your parents weren't necessarily, you know, it wasn't something that they emphasized or something?
No, my parents never emphasized it at all. You know, I'm sure they were happy when we both entered, or any of them went to the seminary. But I think in one of the articles that you would see that it was our decision and not theirs. In fact, I know I didn't even tell my mother and dad until about 6 months before I was going to enter that I was even thinking of it. And because I was a girl, my dad didn't think that it was necessary for me to drive. Now, I was old. I was 19, 20 years old, and he didn't think the boy should drive me or man should drive me. So he wouldn't teach me how to drive a car. As soon as I told him I was entering, I got my license just like that. You know, so see, I entered 2 years later. After high school, I entered the community, 2 years out of high school, because I went to Mercy College for 2 years.
What year was that?
I graduated from high school in 47 and entered the community in 49, August of 49.
What about Tom? When did he?
He went right from grade school. Tom went to Sacred Heart Seminary right from grade school to the high school.
So Tom knew before you did then? Or I mean, I guess I'm trying to get a fix on how old he was when he decided.
I would say he did. I mean, at least he entered the seminary. Now, maybe when we actually thought of it or had that desire to go, who knows? I mean, it could have been way back and, you know, as a kid, the same as, you know.
Let me get that as a complete thought, because it's not clear to me. So when did Tom enter the seminary? How old was he in that whole...
He was ninth grade. He entered as a ninth grader into high school, to the Sacred Heart Seminary.
And that was pretty normal then?
It was quite normal, yes, yes. It was normal for most boys to go through their high school years. Now, my other two brothers, Jerry entered as a ninth grader also, and then he knew that that wasn't his choice, so he left then. And then Jack and Dan entered after high school. Jack entered after serving in the service for 2 years or 3 years, whatever.
How do you know if a vocation is right for you? How would Tom or you know that it was the thing to do?
I think you just have that desire to do something of that sort, and there's just something within you that you have the desire to serve God in that capacity.
All right. You know, Tom seems happiest alone, praying or reading. You know, and it's kind of a contrast to his kind of public persona. Can you talk about Tom in that regard?
I think he is. He will tell you too that I think Tom does enjoy being alone, but he also enjoys being with people too. No matter at a function, a family function, he will. He's more a one-on-to-one, I think, too, oftentimes, as opposed to, you know, getting himself involved with a whole group of people. But he does seem to, you know, step aside at times. You know, that might be just part of his, you know, later life, in the fact that he's always on the spot. People are always asking him questions, so this is his way of stepping aside and not being the main focus, too, you know, of a group of people.
Was that like when he was younger now? When he played sports, did he like being the quarterback? I mean, was that always been like that, or?
I would say it's, no, I would say that growing up, he joined in and we would have table discussions and we would, you know, and he was always part of that. And being on the teams, he wanted to be right there, right in the limelight as winning. You know, even in grade school, he was always, you know, on the football teams and that they had. I think it was only a football team that we had at Epiphany grade school that he could play on. Because in those days, you didn't have all those other sports either. And he did have his paper route, which, you know, helped out.
You know, it's a different time. Yeah. Happy with, it's a different time. You know, I want to say simpler times, but you know, there weren't as many choices, I guess.
That's right. There were no choices, or very, very few choices. I don't know when he started playing hockey, but that must. Well, we grew up playing those sports, so too. Even on the streets, we always had a pair of ice skates. You know, every one of us. And my mom would take us over to Rouge Park in the wintertime because there were no other places around. So Mom would take us over there, and we could skate or on the rinks at Rouge Park. We didn't live that far, but far enough that, you know. And but at other times we could go down to the side streets, and the snow would be packed down, and we could go down there and play ice skate, or we would play. I didn't play hockey as much, but my other brothers played hockey a lot down there, you know, and with the neighborhood people, and so neighborhood.
You know, you brought up that thing about Tom being competitive. So has Tom always been competitive?
Yes.
Isn't that a complete...
Oh, Tom, yes, Tom has always been very competitive. Sports, academics, and, you know, his whole life is one of competition as such.
How does that relate to today almost? You know, do you think that motivates him to see things through? Or, I mean, how does that play into what his life is like today?
I would think the competitiveness would play an important part in his life, because otherwise I don't think he could be doing what he does all the time, you know, as opposed to going around and talking to different people. He wants to see things being carried through, and if there's an action, then he wants to be there to do that action, or if there's a trouble someplace, he wants to be there to help to take care of that trouble, or to, you know, to eliminate it.
You know, Tom seems out of step with the greater Catholic Church right now, or is it the church that's out of step with Jesus now? I mean,
I think the church is out of step with Jesus. No, yes, I think the church in many ways is out of step in the fact that we are not following the mandates of Christ. And Tom, I think, gets that across in his homilies a lot, that if we would just follow these mandates that through the Bible and through the gospel stories, that we wouldn't be at war, we wouldn't be doing these things, we wouldn't be hurting people, we wouldn't have poverty in the world as such. And even in the Detroit area, the amount of poverty that we have in Detroit is unnecessary when you think of the wealth that the U.S. has. And I think that's where the Gospels, that the church does not follow through all the time on the gospel teachings.
You know, I've seen it, you know, myself. You know, I'm a member of Shrine of Little Flower out in the suburbs, you know, and they're putting all this money into a big addition and all this stuff. And, you know, and here, we're St. Leo's, where they're actually accomplishing stuff. You know, what's happening within the church? You know, I guess one thing that I heard is that, I think it's Father Thomas said that, you know, the church, or no, it was actually Tom said it, the church isn't here to perpetuate the church, it's here to help the poor, it's to, you know, what is the purpose of the church?
The purpose of the church is to help the poor, to help the people, to help all of us get to save us, really, from, you know, to get to heaven and to be with God in all eternity. And I think that's one way that we can get there too, is by helping people. But if the church is not helping people, even my own experience of working with the people, I've worked down here in the city about 35 years myself, you know, because I was at Holy Trinity for 26 years, right over here in the neighborhood. And they just don't, they're do-gooders oftentimes, and they don't know quite how to help. And oftentimes, many people, like out in the suburbs, and I'm sure out in Royal Oak, and even where I am, people are afraid to come down here because of what they hear about the city. And but what is the church doing to help those people? In many cases, not too much.
You know, it's amazing how Tom lives. You know, can you describe Tom's life now, how he lives very simply? And
Tom lives very simply in the fact that he lives in the former, I believe it would have been the maintenance house way back when the churches first started. The maintenance people always lived on the property and had their own little home. And so right now, his office, his living area is one room basically, and he lives in there. He has his office attached, but it's very, very small, and there's nothing spectacular about it, and most priests probably would not be able to live there, you know, or to sleep on a futon, or, you know, and I couldn't either.
And that's the whole point is, you know, if somebody's, you know, living their life like Jesus, who do you think is doing that?
I think Tom is living his life like Jesus did, because I think Jesus did live very poorly. He had no pillow to lay his head on, and I think, you know, like with Tom, it basically is the same. He does live very simply. He can care less for a lot of things. I mean, even when we're together and I'm fixing a dinner, I can serve him almost anything, and he enjoys it. At least he says he does. You know, so I can fix him anything. He's not fussy. And his clothes, I mean, he's just not fussy about anything.
Well, there's a couple more things, but I'm not sure how to go about it. Let's go with, can you relate the story about your brother Dan and your mom's question to Tom? That seemed like a big moment there, you know?
It was a big moment for my mom. See, Dad had already passed away when Dan came out, and I don't know, you know, if he was afraid to mention it to my dad or what, but you know, because Dad was more, I always considered my dad a little bit more strict, you know, religious-wise, and he had a harder time accepting a lot of the changes in the church as opposed to my mother. My mother had no problem accepting changes. I mean, she went right, whatever Tom said, that was it. So she had no problem with that, but Dad did. And so Dan probably waited until not to hurt Dad. And so her question was, well, will Dan go to hell? And there's no reason, you know. And so finally she read up on it, and Tom would give her magazines and books to read about it. And she came up to her conclusion too, that this had to have been from birth. There is just no two ways about it. And you're born as a gay person or a lesbian or a homosexual or whatever, you know, you're born that way as opposed to desiring it. Because even when you think he went to the Holy Cross Brothers, he was there for, I think I read 4 years. I was already in the community by that time. And then he married. He had 4 beautiful daughters. And he basically raised the daughters. And the daughters idolized him. So he tried to, you know, avoid being that, I guess, is what you might want to call it. And, you know, so then my mother accepted it and said, well, this is it.
What was the exact thing? Did she ask you or she asked Tom? What was the exact question that
she asked Tom, and I believe it went something to the effect that, will Dan go to hell? And Tom said, well, no, Mom, no, he won't go to hell. You know, he was born like that, so then she accepted that.
And I've talked to Dan on the phone. He just sounds like a wonderful guy. I wish I had realized he was in town in the summer. Yeah, and he's gone. And I asked if he's going to come back for the holidays, and I guess he won't be back till next summer now. So
yeah.
I'm going to try to talk to him. We'll see what we can do. But being in California, it's just
yeah.
the logistics. And just to go back to your mom real quickly, you know, because the mentality nowadays, I mean, people accept gay people much more readily nowadays. I mean, but what, you know, help me understand what was she was feeling, or how, her mentality, or, you know, what age was she, or, you know, put me in her state of mind. Or when
she was probably, my mother was probably, I would say close to 80, 81, something like that, when Dan came out with it. And that hurt her, because at that time you were not supposed to be gay. You just could not be. You're not normal. There's something wrong with you if you are. And I think she, you know, the fact that she had to face that with her friends. And it's interesting, because there's some people that even said to myself, well, you know, I'll stand by you. And so my mother had to face some of that too, you know, with her friends. Well, you got a son that's gay. Well, hey, you maybe have too if you looked around. You know, you don't know. And if they don't come out, but you can come out with it, well, it's different. But she took it hard, you know, and she felt that it was her fault for a long time. It was her fault that Dan was like this. In no way is it a parent's fault.
All right, changing tracks here. You know, Haiti, Iraq, El Salvador, poverty. You know, Tom is on every. You know, what is Tom accomplishing? I mean, what is Tom doing?
I think Tom accomplishes by going to Haiti, by going to Iraq, by going to Iran. What he does, he supports the people over there. I don't know how much political he, you know, that can change by doing that. But he makes other people aware of what is happening over there and over in these countries. And I think that's important for the people here in America to be aware of and to be made aware of, because you know, if you don't get another viewpoint on some of these issues, you're not going to change and you're not going to help to make things better. So by him going over there and seeing it, being part of it, helping those people over there, taking supplies to them, then I think that's what he accomplishes that way.
Can one man make a difference, though? I mean, he does
Well,
all this work.
I think one man can make a difference. I think he has made a difference in many ways. Just his congregation here, I think he's made a difference with a lot of those people. And even in the little way up in Algonac, because I have gone up there and they know that Tom is down here, they, you know, that they have started to come to St. Leo's to help in the soup kitchen. So that's one little way that he maybe has made a difference, and many of them were afraid to come the first time they came, and they have to come and go. You know, they don't want to hang around too long. But, you know, but I think that's one way that he has made the difference.
You know, you okay on tape? You know, the Archdiocese just, you know, doesn't really support Tom that much, it seems. You know, I don't know what, but is he, you know, I guess give me your perspective on that. You know, what it seems to me that the Archdiocese is just waiting for Tom and these other guys just to die and get out of the way. And is you think that's what the case is? We may not use this, but
I think in many instances, I think it is that the diocese, he's too verbal for them, and he's too outspoken for the diocese to handle. And I think that, like, even when he would go down to the bishops' meetings, because he was so young, they just sort of ignored his questions or his, what would you say, comments, because he was so young, and they thought he was just, you know, and then he didn't stay with them. He went off to the Y and lived at the Y because he was trying to, that was just too much for him. And, you know, like, so I think in many instances they are, you know, like a lot of the priests down in this whole area, they're probably just waiting, because they're all of retired age, most of them, and so when they have to really retire, but I don't know. No, I think the diocese does sort of ignore it and just let him do what he can do. Don't put any fuel on the fire.
You know, it's just funny though. What, you know, part of Tom is I'm trying to figure out what these priests. You know, there's a couple of them down here. These radical, kind of not radical priests, but they're. Was it the '60s? Was it Vatican II? What do you think made these guys, you know, the way they are? What makes Tom the way he is?
But they were. Well, I think what makes him the way he is his early training, and also through the seminary, that the group of seminarians that the young men that he went to school with, were of that same mentality. And then even in high school or college, he would come down to, there was a Bosco house, John Bosco house over near Sacred Heart Parish over here. And they would come down and help out at that point. And his missionary spirit, if you want to call it that, was ingrained in him at that time. And so he went out and did things of that sort. And I think it's just been a continuous carryover into his whole life.
The priests nowadays are so different. I mean, very few priests you see coming out, they seem almost like technicians or bureaucrats or administrators. Contrast that with your brother? I mean, tell me.
Because I think today in the seminary, encourage the seminarians to go out into the areas that would be poor, that need more help. Where do they send most of the seminarians? Out to the suburbs, and to be their deacons or that year of training. And so they don't get the feeling that the city is important.
So because the Archdiocese doesn't emphasize the city and its kind of mission,
That's right.
because I remember at Shrine, I was videotaping a younger associate pastor, and he was talking about Jesus, and then there's high and low, and on the low side there's people like Gumbleton. He almost said it derisively.
That's right. That's right. They do. I mean, even at my brother Vincent's, even at the parish that my mom and dad should have belonged to, they did the same thing. And my mom and dad were sitting right there in the front pew, and the pastor, now they had been in the parish a number of years, and the pastor came out and said something about Tom that was negative. My mother was ready to get up and walk out, but my dad wasn't. So they stayed, but they never went back. Never went back.
And what did he say about, do you remember offhand?
I don't quite remember, but it's something to that effect, that he was just out there, doing his thing and wasn't of any value.
I hear from many people that, Tom is like a saint among us,
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that? As your brother, can you think of that? It's like, he's just my brother, he's not.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, no, he is.
Well,
he is I would have to say he is a prophet. Tom is a prophet in his own way, in that he does try to, I would say he is a prophet. I don't know about a saint, but a prophet. No, he is a very holy man too. I have to admit that.
And maybe I use the word saint, but maybe prophet is the right term.
Yeah, he is a very
His
holy
sister,
man.
Rita said he reminds her of the prophet Isaiah, I think it was what she thought. But,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's correct.
Because you can always make sure that he's going to have his prayers said. When we're together up north, he's down there saying his prayers, and you almost say, okay, I don't interrupt you right now because you're either reading your breviary or you're saying the rosary or whatever. And then afterwards, and then at night, before we have the liturgy, we always have a mass up there. And before we have the liturgy, he's saying his breviary at that point. And, so he is, he makes sure that no matter what, he does do the prayers. And not as I got to get them in, but because they're important to him.
Okay. 20 or 30 years from now, because probably 20 years, Tom will be 95. He'll still be in good health, better health than I am.
Yes.
How will Tom be remembered? How do you think people remember Tom?
Oh. Well, I think it will go down. I think they will remember him as time goes along, I think as a prophet. I think they will remember him in that way, that he tried to do for other people. He was always on the lookout to help other people succeed, to do their best, to be able to be good Christians and good people. Maybe not always a Christian because you have your other, sex.
With a T, right?
Yeah.
How do you think Tom would want to be remembered? Tom seems so humble.
I don't think he would care how he's remembered, as long as they, would think well of him, and that he did try to do what he could do for people.
Well, those are all my questions. Is there something that you thought, you got to ask me about this? I wanted to talk about this about Tom. Is there something like that?
No, I think you've covered a lot.
Okay.
Did I answer your
I
questions?
think you did a great job. Wally, do you something that you think would be a question to ask? Let's stop tape for a second here. Let me just get my thoughts together here. kind of out of step with the church, or the church is really out of step with Jesus. But, what are Tom's views on ordaining women and gays, and, just to cover that?
Well, I think as one of the articles that he spoke on was that I don't see that he would have a problem with ordaining women, because that came into the church in later years. And I don't know if you've seen some pictures of the Last Supper where the women were, and there were children around at the same table that Jesus was celebrating the Last Supper. And it's really a very, very nice picture if you haven't ever seen it. And I don't think he would ever have trouble with ordaining women, if that ever came to be. But he knows in his time that will never happen. And then the gays, he certainly has come around on the gay issue and has accepted them. He goes to their meetings. He's given talks at their conferences in regards to that. And he definitely, yes, he definitely, I would say, has accepted the gay people among us.
All right, I think we're pretty much done. Did he walk through the Sean thing? Or he did? Yeah, okay, it's not a big deal. All right, let's stop tape. I think we're there because he's going to walk out.
Yeah.
And we'll let the
Let me just tell you first that I think the death of my brother Jack was very hard on him, which would show, his compassion and his empathy. And then with the death of Bishop Utner too, I think that was very hard on Tom. And I don't know if you, well, even Vincent's was very hard, because we had to go home and tell my mother and dad that Vincent had been, injured in that. But then with Jack, we had been trying to contact him, and neither of us got there. And so then we found Jack dead. And I think that really did a lot to Tom.
How old was Jack? Was he older or younger? Or what?
He was a year younger than Tom. And yeah, he was just a year younger. So but they were very close too, that, because Tom would go to his hockey games, and he could come to the house, and he and Jack would discuss a lot of things, political, hockey, or sports. Jack knew all about the sports as well as Tom did. And but political aspects, he would be able to compete with Tom too. He would always tell him, "You're dumb, Tom. Do that." Tom, why are you doing that? You're dumb.
That brings up a good point. As far as your family, Tom has a lot of democratic values as far as pro-union and stuff. My dad worked in the factory for 40 years, and so I understand it. But maybe help people understand, what's made Tom want to help the poor and stuff. Is it your family in general, or,
If that was, I don't know how to answer that one, as such. We grew up, sharing, because you were in a large family, you had to share, and we were very, very close in age, So there was no chance of not being spoiled. And Tom wasn't spoiled any more than the rest of us, if any of us were spoiled, because we had enough, but we didn't have just anything that we wanted. So he just had to share, and that was it, So.
All right. Well, good. I think we're all set then.